This is Mike Spratt from Spratt Crafted Fishing Lures to talk to you about the catch and release strategies for muskellunge. When we finish a season where the fish at 10,000 casts feels like the fish of 10 million casts, it's a good time to reflect on our practices. I do most of my fishing close to home, around the Ottawa area, and we're lucky enough to have very typical Canadian lakes and rivers. I'm noticing that musky fishing has become way more popular, and there's been steady growth since the pandemic. I see more and more boats on the water. I see more people chucking big musky lures, and I see more people using high-end technology to find fish. As a lure maker, it's hard to complain about a growing market, but with the increased pressure, the sustainability of our fisheries is an ongoing concern, and I get worried. Online videos and social media are a great resource for finding out how to catch muskies, but I can confidently say that many of our fishing influencers are more concerned about getting the best video or the perfect picture than ensuring that that fish survives its 10 seconds of fame. It can be painful to see a mishandled fish or stressed out fish and wonder if it's okay. The purpose of this video is to educate new and experienced anglers on proper handling techniques to increase a muskie's chance of survival and the sustainability of our fisheries. All catch and release fishermen need to accept the fact that some fish will not survive. Muskies are particularly sensitive to the catch and release process, and there's always some delayed mortality, meaning fish can appear healthy but swim away and die, which means we all have a duty of care to the fish that we catch. I've been a member of Muskies Canada since the 90s, and I'll never pretend to know it all, but I can say that I've learned my release techniques from some of the very best, and I've been refining them for over 30 years. The Ottawa chapter of Muskies Canada played a significant role in raising the size limits of fish in our local waters, as high as 54 inches. These limits have no meaning if the fish are not handled properly, because the sustainability is still at risk. Our chapter also has a partnership with the Cook Lab of Fish Ecology and Conservation Physiology at Carleton University. In this clip, you can see two biologists putting an internal tag in a Jock River muskie. My partner and I fished all day. We provided 3 fish for this project, and those fish are still alive and well, swimming around in the river and being detected each year. As a muskie angler, everyone should know that muskies are extremely sensitive to stress. The responsible angler needs to minimize the time that a muskie fights, from the hook set to the net, and handle them with the respect that they deserve. In preparation for this video, I had a meeting with Dr. Sean Landsman, professor and fisheries ecologist at Carleton University. He explained that there are 3 factors that determine the probability of survival in a muskie after release. Number 1 is air exposure. Hook removal, measurement, and photography all have to be done in such a way that minimizes the amount of time a fish is out of water. Some people like to hold their breath as soon as the fish comes out of the net to see if they can go without oxygen as long as the fish has to. Number 2 is dry surface contact. Musky slime is a protective barrier, and it can be removed or damaged if fish are put down on the floor of the boat, or even worse if they're dropped. A dry bump board can also be harmful, so be sure to dunk it in the water before laying your fish on it. Number 3 is overall handling of the fish. Every fish is different. A responsible angler reacts to the needs of the fish and adapts their handling to minimize stress based on the situation. Incidents like a prolonged fight, a really hard hook extraction, a bad wrap up in the net, a cut fish that might be bleeding, or a dropped fish, these are all reasons to cut down on the air exposure and get that fish right back in the water. I asked Dr. Landsman for the scientific perspective on stress in fish. He explained that the anaerobic energy release that occurs during a fight builds up lactic acid throughout the fish, like a cramp. But that's only one piece of the issue. Stress is also associated with the exchange of oxygen and dissolved ions in the gills, one of which is potassium. Also, the depleted stores of glucose that the fish would normally use slowly in nature get used up. These are why stress continues even when the fish is in the net, definitely when it's having hook removed, and of course, when they're out of the water. In one of their studies at Carleton U, the team revealed that the buildup of potassium can cause cardiac arrest in fish. This may explain why some of us have experienced a fish that seemed to die for no obvious reason. Minimizing potassium buildup means limiting air exposure, and for those of us that are a little superstitious, it's one more reason not to bring bananas in the boat. Hook removal should happen with the fish in the net, the basket of the net in the water. Muskies are hard-hitting fish, and hook removal can be complicated, so we do our work with the fish submerged, so it has continued oxygen supply from the water. Do not use your net to lift the fish in the boat. The net and the floor can remove or damage their protective slime. The hook removal usually takes way longer than you think it will, and if the fish thrashes, it can injure itself badly. Secure the net to the boat, but leave the basket in the water the whole time, so the fish can start some of their recovery right away. A muskie is always supported with two hands, one hand grabbing firmly under the jaw and the other under its side. I prefer my dominant hand be at the head so I can better control the fish if it goes squirrely when it's out of the water. Never hold a muskie vertically, particularly large ones, as you may damage their spinal cord. If you plan to have an inexperienced angler or a child hold a muskie, have a firm strategy in place so the photo can be taken quickly. Decide when and how the fish is going to be held in advance, and make sure they're ready to hold a wild animal before it ever comes out of the net. Let's start with some equipment that is key to a successful release. We're going to start with the net. The net is your most important tool in safely capturing and releasing a muskie. The hoop has to be big enough so you can scoop up large fish. The basket has to be deep enough that the fish can stay in there while we're working on hooks and while the fish is recovering. Reels. The reels we use for muskie fishing are bait casters, and that's part of what we need to do for the fish. They have to be strong, they have to be able to hold strong line, and they have to have a heavy drag. Some of these reels have a drag of up to 30 pounds, which is a lot. Muskie fishermen don't use the open face spinning reels that you see in saltwater because the fights with a muskie are not that screaming drag and long distances and long time. We want to be able to winch them in quickly to make sure that they are not overstressed during the fight. A long fight is very bad for a muskie. The braid, the line is braid, not monofilament. I like 80 to 100 pound test. It's a little overkill in terms of its weight, but the bigger diameter of braid is good for fraying in case your line ever comes into contact with rocks, logs, or the boat sometimes. And of course, we want to make sure that we have a really quality leader, and we check the leader and we check the line every time we go fishing and sometimes throughout the day to make sure you have no nicks in this section and no frays here, because a break off is obviously really bad for any fish. Release tools. I'm going to show you what I have for release tools. First of all, I like a set of long pliers. I hope you can see those. A set of long pliers and a set of short pliers. I also keep them lubricated so they don't stiffen up if they get wet.
This tool is called a hook out. If anybody has used those, you grab the hook and you're able to push backwards a little better with a hook out. I'm between long ones. Usually I like a longer one. And it's really nice for keeping your hands away from the fish, and very quick releases, especially if you're doing a water release. That's a nice tool. Some people like grips that will grab the jaw of the fish, or even a jaw spreader. I don't have those in my boat. I've never felt that I super needed them, and I've also I've definitely heard stories of people misusing those and causing them to either get teeth or hooks in their hands. And the last one, which is super crucial, is your bolt cutters. These I highly recommend. They're Nipex is the brand. They just have a little more leverage when it comes down to clamping on the hook. If you cut a hook in a fish's mouth, what's left in the mouth is very easy to pull out. The tip of the hook, even though it's still got a barb, once the hook is off, it comes out a lot like a sliver, and it's really easy to get off. And of course, it makes a quicker, safer release. And if anyone ever gets a hook in the hand, which sadly happens, it's part of the sport, this is crucial to have in the boat, for safety, of course.
The muskie is respectfully placed back in the water, nose pointed into any current and supported by the angler with both hands. Often they take off immediately with a see you later kind of splash in the face, and that's a sign of a healthy fish. If they're not ready to swim, you keep them in place and let the oxygenated water bring them back to a state where they can swim on their own. The goal is to let the fish feel as free and natural as possible. They don't need to be pushed back and forth or gripped firmly. Hold the fish as gently as possible and let go as soon as it can stay upright on its own and starts moving its tail. Sometimes you have to wait patiently. It can be several minutes, but you're going to feel with your hands when they're steady, upright, and ready to go. Responsible anglers do not torpedo release.
All fishing lures are dangerous, and big lures with big hooks are particularly dangerous. They're dangerous to fish, and they're dangerous to fishermen. What I want people to consider is the possibility of changing the hooks on their lure for the sake of the fish. The first thing that we think about is how a muskie attacks their prey. They tend to hit from underneath, and they also tend to attack in the head. So with a crankbait like this, removing the middle hook would maybe allow enough room for a fish to grab the middle without a hook, but of course the hook set is designed to slide the fish down and hopefully grab something in the back. Or we might consider removing the back hook, because when a fish is hooked with the front hook, everything else is in a position where it can really damage the fish. Hooks can get into the eyes, hooks can get into the gills, and sometimes they can really cut up the side of the fish with that tail. If it's flapping around, it can also cause an extra mess in the net. Anyone who fishes with big rubber baits, here they are. You already subscribe to that philosophy, because a big rubber bait doesn't have a hook in the back, and they catch lots of big muskies because the fish tend to hit them right in the head. I'll use this opportunity to plug a couple of the lures that I make, and these are some big ones. If you're fishing with something that's 14 to 17 inches long, my preference is that these end up on a mantle or a desk somewhere on display. But if you do end up with something this big, I would never leave this back hook on. That would come off for the safety of the fish. The other example that I want to show that I use very regularly is the sledge. With a sledge, I always take that very back hook off. It's my summer lure. Fish are always hitting it very hot, very fast, so they're hitting it in the head, and I get my hook sets. So I will either have no hook in the back, which actually increases the action of the lure in the water, or I can put a rubber tail on, just a little bit of waterproof super glue, and that rubber tail will stay on for quite a while. And that's another nice way to turn that lure into something that's still effective and safe. The last thing that people should consider, if I zoom in, is pinching those barbs. It is growing with popularity. It's mandatory in parts of North America for some fish species. If you pinch the barb, it's way safer for the fish. It's way safer for the angler. It just means that there has to be a little more skill and luck to getting that fish into the boat.
Muskie stress can be fatal. A mishandled muskie can swim away after the release and die shortly after. Sometimes it'll float up, other times it may be tangled in weeds or carried in current. You can see the stress in a muskie by the redness of their fins. Fish that had a long fight to the boat or were held out of the water for too long end up with blood accumulating in their fins, and it's visible to the angler. I took this photo of a fish that was caught on 25-pound monofilament and poorly handled by an experienced guide. You can see the discoloration in the fins and tails. It eventually swam away on its own, but based on what I know, I'm not optimistic that this fish is still alive. Muskies in warmer water stress faster because of their heightened metabolism. Whether we should stop fishing muskies in temperatures that exceed 80 degrees Fahrenheit has been a controversial or hot topic. For this one, I reached out again for a scientific perspective. Dr. Landsman states, "I don't ascribe to the idea that we stop fishing at a particular water temperature and don't advocate for that, although I don't fault people for doing so if they choose. The science on the subject doesn't necessarily support the need to stop completely either. I instead recommend a change in handling practices." In our follow-up conversation, he referenced 3 separate studies done in the US that looked at mortality rates in muskies. In two of the studies, fish in smaller water bodies with temperatures exceeding 80 degrees had mortality rates of approximately 25%, far less than the rumored 50+%. In the last study, fish in a large reservoir in Ohio had mortality rates of 10% or less. The big difference in the 3 studies was likely that fish in the reservoir had access to deeper and cooler water for their recovery, where the others did not. He also reminded me that fish in any temperature water have a natural post-release mortality rate of around 5% regardless of their handling, meaning that fish that are unhealthy, old, or approaching a natural death are likely to succumb to their condition in the process of a catch and release. His proposition was that warm water anglers should minimize stress using a water release, where the fish never comes out of the water. They can be photographed boat side and measured with a tape or a submerged bump board. I keep a collection of fantastic photos taken with a GoPro of fish that are submerged, and with the correct waterproof setup, any angler can still be included in the photo. Everything we do from hookset to release should be executed with the health of the fish in mind. Pack and organize the right tools, have a plan for when fish are caught, and respect the muskie. When we think about how special it is to catch one, the sustainability of our fishery should be part of our reflection. If more muskies survive, then there are more to reproduce and more to be caught for current and future generations. Here are the 3 takeaways that are necessary to fulfill your own duty of care for the muskellunge. Number 1, minimize air exposure. Number 2, avoid dry surface contact. And number 3, be reactive and adaptive in your overall fish handling. I hope everyone watching is in a position to put these into action. Please share this video with anyone who fishes for muskies or is thinking about it. Thanks for watching.